Over my years of covering Nintendo Switch games, I've covered many driving adventures. With that have come many of you wanting to know if these driving games can be controlled not with the Nintendo Switch controllers, but a racing wheel. Now the Switch does have some gimmicky little attachments that can house the Joy-Cons for games that offer motion steering, but what you all asked for was not something like that. You guys want a legitimate clamp to your desk and connect vehicle pedals to it accessory that feels like an actual steering wheel. After getting a recent question regarding using a wheel with SnowRunner, I decided it was finally time to look into getting a full-sized wheel for my Switch and find out just what games it could work on. Pretty much the only high-quality wheel of its kind for the system, and for only $100. Here is my review of the HORI Racing Wheel Pro Deluxe, made for the Nintendo Switch. First up is the design. Unlike the wheels that house Joy-Cons for motion steering, this is a full-sized racing wheel. Not quite as thorough, but its size and build can be compared to the likes of Thrustmaster and Logitech, with a complete button interface and a set of pedals you can attach to it. Taking a closer look, the wheel has the Z, L, and ZR buttons on the steering wheel, with most of the other buttons in the middle, namely the D-pad, face buttons, start, select, home, screenshot, and even a couple buttons for L3 and R3. We also have two paddles in the back that function as the L and R triggers. Going a bit more in depth, we also have the assign button and a little switch on top. The switch moves the wheel's configuration between emulating the D-pad, left analog, and right analog. This lets you move it around between what certain games allow for. Mario Kart 8, for example, lets you control steering with both the left analog stick and D-pad, but most other racing titles don't allow that much flexibility. Then we have the assign button, which can do a lot of nifty things. You can hold it down to customize any button or pedal on this interface to make it any other button. It even works for the pedals, letting you set them to any button of your choosing, which we will be getting into a bit later. Finally, this wheel has several different levels of sensitivity and customizable dead zones. This allows you to make the steering tight or loose when you start playing games that have different sensitivity built into their handling. Next up is compatibility. As far as platforms go, you can connect this wheel to the Nintendo Switch as well as PC. I did try plugging it into my PS4, but it was not recognized and did not work. Now with a racing wheel, my first question was what games it was compatible with. If you look at consoles like the PS4 or Xbox One, games pretty much have to be made compatible with certain racing wheels. If they haven't, they simply won't work. But that's the genius of this wheel. It doesn't recognize on your Switch as a racing wheel, but rather a USB controller. You can navigate the eShop, start and close games, and pretty much anything else a normal wired controller does. The turning of the wheel is simply emulating an analog stick or D-pad being moved around. So what games is it compatible with? All of them. A simple reassignment of the pedals to whatever the gas and brake are in that specific game, and it can be used for literally anything. That allows this wheel to answer the most important question of all. Can I play one of the Switch's original racing games, Vroom in the Night Sky, with a racing wheel? Yes, you can. Now that we've established that you can play anything with it, let's talk about how it performs. The sensitivity is highly customizable, and it has a nice resistant feel when you're turning it to drive. I did play around with all 7 settings for the sensitivity, though the default I felt was just right for most games that I played. Now speaking of games, I tested over a dozen different driving games, including but not limited to Asphalt 9, Burnout Paradise, Grid Autosport, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, SnowRunner, Super Street Racer, and Truck Driver. I was able to play nearly every game I tested comfortably with this wheel, just having to tweak sensitivity here and there. But it isn't perfect. This wheel has 2 basic limitations. One is a little unfair as it depends on the sensitivity of the games you're playing, while the other is the pedals. The steering is great for most games, but ultra-sensitive racers are where it fails. Now I say racers, but I'm really just talking about Asphalt 9. For whatever reason, that game's ultra-sensitive steering this wheel cannot accommodate for. Whether the game's sensitivity is high or low, and the same for this wheel, you cannot steer in a stable way. Every slight turn I try to make ends in me spinning out no matter what vehicle I am driving. But thankfully, this was the only game this happened to. Now let's talk about the pedals. They work great when you press them down to go or stop, but they have no concept of pressure. When you press them down, the wheel thinks you're holding down whatever button you have assigned to them. Whether I am barely tapping the gas or holding it down to the floor, it always thinks you want maximum acceleration. Now, one of you was commenting on this with me the other day regarding SnowRunner, and this might just be a Nintendo Switch thing. They plugged in a different racing wheel to the Switch, and the pedals did the same thing. Now, this won't matter at all for games like Mario Kart, where you don't need to constantly change pressure. But if you try anything like a sim or playing the drift-heavy Car X Drift Racing Online, it will be pretty awkward to use properly versus a standard controller. Now as we wrap this up, this racing wheel works pretty well for more casual and arcade-style driving games. If you want it for Mario Kart, Need for Speed, or even Truck Driver, it is a fun little novelty controller to have and use. And the fact that it registers as a USB controller enabling compatibility for everything is definitely nice. But if you want it for something with high sensitivity like Asphalt 9 or more heavy simulation driving, it will be a hassle with how the pedals work. But even so, it's not bad for a full-sized wheel that costs a fraction of what you would pay for the Logitech or Thrustmaster wheels on the other consoles. Reviews to go rates the HORI Racing Wheel Pro Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.